everybody. Thank you so much for your patience. We're going to go ahead and get started. Anybody who's coming in late, they can catch up. You guys have been here for a good amount of time. I appreciate that. By way of introduction, I've said it a couple of times, but in case you didn't hear, my name is Steve Ward. I'm going to be your presenter for today. I've been here at Source Defense for a couple of years. Really glad to see so many great brands represented on this call today. Very important topic to discuss today, very pressing issue as it relates to your PCI compliance. Just over the horizon, got to address new web security requirements found in DSS 4.0. Specifically, what we'll be talking about are requirements that are 6.4.3 and 11.6.1. Just want to say a couple things on the housekeeping front. Phones are muted, but we want to make this interactive. There is a question window, there's a chat window. Feel free to use either as we go along in the session. If something pops in your head, throw the question out. We'll get to it in the order received. We'll have some Q&A at the bottom end of the call here. Probably gonna get you back and moving into your day a little early against the calendar, so we won't go the full hour. But we're here in any follow-up, and if you have any questions that don't get resolved today, we'll be sharing some contact details and info. Feel free to follow back up. We'll also drop you a recording of the session on the back end, probably in about 24 hours, so that you can share with colleagues around your organization. I know that we have clusters of people here today from the same orgs, and then we've got this wide swath of folks, from banking to retail to hospitality to travel. It's really an issue that impacts all merchants or anyone that is defined as a merchant under the PCI standard. A lot of great brands that I've done business with for decades of my life. So great to see you here and great to see you taking this seriously. So yeah, let's jumpstart here. Let's kick in. Kickstarting PCI DSS 4.0, a timeline for success. Getting in front of the requirements to assess, manage, and monitor the new web security requirements in PCI DSS 4.0. I wanted to start real quick with just an introduction on Source Defense. Some of you may not know who we are. We are, a brand that's been around for some time now, specifically focused on client-side security. Ultimately, that's what's called for under the requirements here. We really look at our job as, protecting data at the point of capture. And if you think about the PCI standard and, the focus that it's had for so long, data in transit, data at rest, this really is about addressing, the new attack surface, which is adversaries, trying to steal information as it's being entered into the forms on the modern website. And so, we really think we're rounding out web security and really acting as an enabler. I think it's very important to know that, this is an approach that actually supports business growth and expansion by allowing your digital teams to do pretty much anything they need to do to give a great experience for the client. We'll talk about that as we go along here. Really is a third-party risk management issue as well. You think about all the focus that we've placed on the software supply chain and supply chain attacks over the course of the last couple of years. This is an element, of third-party risk because it's about third parties, and it's about, probably the most, if not one of the, or if not the most important customer-facing application that you have, which is your website. We also think that, if you've got to focus on zero trust, you cannot, really fulfill the zero trust sort of concept without addressing, this issue. And then there's some supportive and accretive, sort of connections to SBOM for those of you who are focused on SBOM. And I'll talk a little bit about all of that as we go along. But that's sort of like a definition of, sort of who we are. We're about protecting data at the point of capture. We address data security, data privacy, and compliance. And I'll talk about the privacy element as we go along here as well. We're obviously here today to talk about PCI, but we think that there's some, impacts directly to GDPR that you need to be aware of, as well as HIPAA and even FFIEC. So we'll talk a little bit about some of that with, heavy emphasis obviously on PCI. That's why you're here, and a little bit of touch on the GDPR HIPAA stuff as we go along. We are not a fly-by-night organization. We've been doing this for a long time now. Our primary use case was around what you might hear referred to as mage card attacks or e-skimming attacks, is how it's referred to in the PCI standard. We came to market to stop this threat back in 2019, And since then, we have been really, sort of like growing rapidly with the brands that are there in the world that, do all these transactions. We protect 20 billion in e-commerce sales, and we stop 8 billion in security and compliance policy violations every year. So PCI DSS says, focus on client-side security. So let's start with just a little quick definition on what that is, right? And the why. It all resolves back to JavaScript, okay? And there's a problem with JavaScript because it's everything, everywhere, all at once. Client-side security is basically, dealing with e-skimming prevention or mage card attacks or, credential harvesting type of attacks, on the modern website. They're using, the adversary is using JavaScript as its attack pathway, because JavaScript can perform any action and essentially behave in any way that it wants on any site where it's running, which happens to be 97% of all the world's websites. No native security controls, and big problem, right? And why is that a big problem? Because in this move from the sort of the traditional world of brick and mortar, if you're a merchant, or the old world of like in-person banking, to everything digital, we've added a lot of feature functionality, and rightfully so, right? We've enhanced the user experience, the customer experience, and the experience means everything. And so we've given over all these tools and capabilities and services that we plug into our website by these third parties, right? And that may be, multimedia, right? Audio, video, that type of, sort of multimedia side of things. It may be rankings and reviews, plugins for things like Yelp and such. It may be all of our social connections that we have, can't live in a world without social proofing or anything like that anymore. Chat bots, right? Increasingly online customer service, it's got to be something that you offer, whether that be AI driven or human driven. And then, on the back end, your digital teams, are using all of these new capabilities, to better target the consumer, to better communicate with your clients, to offer a more enriched experience, to drive shopping cart value, et cetera, et cetera. So widgets, dynamic forms, orders and payments, social media, video, site analytics, chatbots, dev tools, all of these things, have a justification for being on your website, right? There's a need there, a business need, a real fundamental requirement, to make sure that the business moves forward. But it's resulted in a lot of third parties in the mix. We've done some research. We're about to update this with a partner of ours, but did some research about a year ago. An average of about 12 third parties per site. Those 12 partners on average are calling in another 3-4, that are downstream. You may not even know that your partners are working with, right? This is sort of like shadow scripts, or, sort of the supply chain within the supply chain. And, what you might expect is like, well, we've got to have these things in place, but we know where our sensitive data is, and where those collection points are. So we won't run scripts on those pages, and it's just not possible to do so. So much importance in terms of these capabilities and these services, that it is running where sensitive data is captured. And we're seeing that same number, that 12 scripts per site on average on sensitive pages, like where healthcare data is collected, like where payment card data is collected, things of that nature. So you've got this ecosystem of partners to drive these business functions, but ultimately what you've done is you've allowed, instead of zero trust, 100% trust for these services. 82% of code on the modern website, on your website most likely, are outside, the code and the actions are outside of your control. You're effectively let run in every user session, every consumer session, every client session, shadow script. You don't know if it's been compromised. You may not know exactly what the benign nature and state of the script is, and I'll talk a little bit about some data privacy concerns behind that. But this is a problem. And again, at the top, when I mentioned third-party risk management and I mentioned zero trust, we really can't fulfill those objectives if we aren't paying attention to what these scripts are doing that are running on our website. On the data privacy side, we talk a lot about attacks, and the PCI end of things is really focused on, obviously, the protection of card data, and that scraping of data, from these adversaries. But more so of an issue, even when attacks don't exist, you've got a real data privacy risk on your hands. You know, countless sort of examples, high profile news stories of, you know, scripts being deployed against sensitive pages in areas where, you know, the information you're gathering is protected, whether that be, again, GDPR or HIPAA, you know, things of that nature. But the scripts are scraping and collecting and harvesting that data. And a couple famous cases, Meta, you know, lawsuits been you know, levied against them for harvesting healthcare data. The meta tag, metapixel deployed, you know, in a sensitive area across some healthcare websites. The healthcare website owners not understanding what the meta tag's doing. It's scraping data, and then, you know, I'm the consumer who's provided all of this sensitive healthcare information, and I'm getting targeted and retargeted with ads the minute I go on Facebook or the minute I go on Instagram, right? And, you know, that's a bad thing. That's a no-no. Who got a hold of my data? How would you know I have this condition if this data hadn't been shared? A similar example with last year's tax season, where a lot of online tax websites misdeployed or didn't understand or didn't have control over the scripts, and the same kind of thing was happening. And you imagine, you know, real deep financial data. And the reason that this is even happening is because a lot of the way these scripts are written or these services are you know, deployed, at the root of it, they almost have malware at the root, right? You know, they are retrieving input from form fields. They're listening for button clicks. They're, you know, modifying forms. Like, we want that, right? But, you know, this is all bad stuff that the bad guys do. And scraping and you know, harvesting data and pushing it back, you know, on back ends. And we see that across the board. You know, nearly every script we look at has some kind of capability that, you know, could be problematic if not controlled. And that control really is part of, you know, the overall experience for the client. Data security and privacy are huge to the experience. Like, we want, you know, rich and multidimensional experiences online, but we have an expectation that you, as, you know, the owner or the steward of my data, when I give it to you, are going to keep me either safe, right? It's not going to be used, you know, stolen by an adversary, or even just private. You know, this is stuff that I am sharing with you in confidence, and no one else should have access to it. So, you know, it's something that, like, I think the PCI, you know, council was wise in its in the revision to address, because it does have a really big impact, you know, on you as a business. 1 in 5 consumers will ditch a brand after a data breach. 78% of consumers are going to think twice about doing business with you. You know, it's highly impactful, and obviously, you know, the whole goal of the PCI effort is to protect this data and keep it from being used for fraudulent purposes. Visa has signaled an alarm on this in their report back in last April. I'm sure it'll be updated here coming soon as their spring report. They were really flagging it's these third-party code integrations that are among the most common tactics utilized by threat actors to conduct digital skimming attacks. They're targeting these supply chains. They're targeting these third-party service providers. They know you don't have controls in place, you know, to monitor and protect and prevent malicious activity from occurring, and you've got to do something about it. And, you know, that's why 4.0 really does call, you know, for this approach. They said 75% of the breaches they were looking at in that time period involved e-commerce merchants, with the, you know, third-party script or the client-side type of attack being the primary attack pathway. You know, just recently, you know, this is still in the news, right? You know, it's happening all the time. It's about 2 weeks ago. You know, Europol, you know, said that they found 443 compromised merchants that were the victim of one of these slow and low, you know, mage card attacks, right? So it's happening all the time. It's happening behind the scenes, and it's, you know, an underlooked and seemingly complex, you know, issue to address. But we've got, you know, a way to address it that we think is simple, easy, fast, and really cost effective. I mentioned some of this. I probably won't go through it again. Just, you know, keep this in mind, that, you know, this is all stuff that can happen, you know, from the adversarial side of things, you know, should they compromise a script that's running on your site. And one note I think I should make is that, you know, when you think about script management and you think about, you know, sort of the traditional ways we might go about doing things, right? Like, you know, looking at and establishing, you know, baseline, you know, sort of like a whitelist of script, and I'm going to allow this to run. There's so many dynamic changes that are happening in these scripts, right? They're actually dynamic by design. One of our clients, very large company out of Europe, has seen something like 7,300 changes on an annual basis from their partners to the script that's running on their websites. It's not something that we can get a hold of, vet the script and make sure that it's, secure at its, native state. Because of the fact that the stuff changes and changes sometimes by time of day, by location, things of that nature. So PCI says you got a new gap to fill, right? Effectively, it's securing, sort of like in the browser experience, right? The client-side security is here. Traditional web app security, WAF, things of that nature, that ends at the browser, but the attack is, it's happening like, inside the script that's running from your website. And so you got to do something about it. And so what do they say you got to do about it, right? In 6.4.3 and 11.6.1, they say you got to get a hold of this thing. You got to make sure that you are, confirming that the scripts that are running are authorized to be running, right? That what's happening there, right? That you've got an inventory and a justification, and an ongoing, sort of monitoring and dialogue with your digital teams. What are you putting on the website? Why is it there? Is this the sort of list of all services that we see, something that you intend to be there? Then you've got to assure the integrity of each script. And I just mentioned, sort of the difficulty of doing that. How do you ensure that the script has not been compromised when the script changes, 7,000 times a year? Very, very difficult to do. You've got to monitor payment page headers for changes at least once every 7 days. And to my knowledge, that's actually the most prescriptive, against a timeline change in requirement under the standard at this point in time. You're used to and you're familiar with, doing the ASV scans, against the CDE. This now, and that was, quarterly. This now says every week you've got to have capability in place to make sure that the payment page headers have not been modified. And then you've got to be able to alert and block all malicious scripts on your payment pages, right? So, the reason you guys are here today, it's January 17th, right? Effectively you've got 2024, to look at how you're going to solve this problem. Go ahead and cut off, for those of you guys in the retail world, a quarter of that time frame, because of the fact that you're going to go into code freeze at the back end of the year here. And, you've ultimately only got what, 6-7 months, to really get moving on this, to ensure that you're compliant under the 4.0 requirements, on your next ROC or your next SAC-A or whatever you might be filling out. So meeting, maintaining requirements. How do you get there? We suggest you get there now. Ultimately, like, the whole intent of getting moving and solving this problem is to keep a breach from happening, right? It's not just about compliance, it's about the intent. The intent is security, the intent is that data privacy. And so, this is something that we would recommend you put on the early side of your list as it relates to 4.0 requirements. This is not the only change in 4.0, some of which are fairly large and impactful. This is one that can be taken down fairly quickly, but I mean fairly quickly. Like, we've had clients that have actually deployed on the back of breach incidents inside 24 hours, right? And I'll talk about that. But how do you meet and maintain? There's a variety, obviously, of prescriptions that the council gives over in 4.0. They say, okay, for script integrity, you can look at, SRI, sub-resource integrity controls, right? For script behavior, you can look at deploying CSP, content security policy. For external workflows, for script authorization, you can build an external workflow tool or bring an external workflow tool in. Maybe hack the thing together with spreadsheets and documentation for the justification. All that's really, really cumbersome. And the DIY end of things, we think is actually like high cost, high resource intensive. We've seen clients go down this pathway only really to find that, like, CSP doesn't really check the box the right way, SRI doesn't check the box the right way. We're a PCI principal participating organization, and us, along with others in the space, are providing a lot of guidance to the council. There's a call for comment for a .0 change. We really want to make sure that some additional guidance is given to sort of like alert merchants like you of the potential pitfalls of trying to go your homegrown. We really think ultimately part of the guidance says or use a proprietary script management system, whether that's us or a competitor, it doesn't really matter. We just think that's the best pathway to market for you because it's going to be easier and it's not going to distract you from all the other changes that you have to make under the standard. So what is Source Defense? What do we do? How do we help you? Could we be your partner? Quick primer on the way we approach things. So we've got two solution sets. We've got detection and we've got protection, okay? And we offer both in either a limited or a standard version, okay? And when I say limited, what I mean is only on PCI payment pages, right? Only on the payment page side of things. When I say standard, this is what most of our clients do. They go site-wide because there's also a conversation ongoing right now around, is payment pages the right focus for the standard? Or should we really be focusing on payment flows? And we would say payment flows. And I think, when you really dig into it, you'll probably agree. There are upstream capture points that aren't just checkout or shopping cart or, payment of bills or, whatever it may be that you offer. There are capture points, there are wallets, there are things that, upstream, right, could be compromised. There's also the ability of scripts running that are compromised on other pages to present false form fields. And we've seen that in a lot of cases. Like, so if it's let's say it's not a payment page, it's somewhere else, but the adversary, compromises a script that's running somewhere else, not on the PCI checkout page, the payment page. They can actually redirect and spoof and put payment page information, right? Shopping cart information, checkout information in front of the consumer. And so most of our clients go full site, but we do have limited versions for only PCI requirement. It says payment page. If you want to go that route, we can, and we do it in two flavors: an external detection solution where there's no deployment necessary. We scan your web properties from the outside looking in. We do all the things that are required: inventory all scripts, catalog the sensitive data. We monitor and we alert on incidents. We don't block those incidents, right? This is detection only, not protection. And that leaves you, potentially then with having to, not potentially, it leaves you with having to take those alerts, ingest them, put them into your security operation. We think, and most of our clients tell us, yeah, we're not really in the, in a desire to add more strain to an already strained team. And that's where most of our clients just go full blown protection right out of the gates. Now, the good news on the protection side of things is it is also simple. Deployment is not difficult. There's not, hardware to buy. This is a SaaS-based solution. When we deploy very much the same way these other scripts run on your website. We deploy as a few lines of code. We effectively become the script to rule all scripts. We sandbox JavaScript and we control behaviors. We have a full understanding of the vast majority of scripts that are in use today, all the sort of key partners you might be working with. We understand the baseline performance. We analyze new scripts if we haven't seen them. We get a sense for what's going on and what type of behavior that script is allowed to take in its native form. And we effectively place policy-based controls over top of all that. So we're taking the script, we're running it in, sort of like call it a spoof website or a sandbox website. No delay, no lag, no impact to performance. And we are effectively, letting the script run, but we're controlling what it can and can't do and what it can and cannot see. And so, in that way, we have taken a protection first kind of approach to this. There's no alerts to monitor and respond to. We basically thwart the problem automatically, and we defeat client-side attacks automatically. We can give you, much deeper, technical, drill down on that in another call. If you want to, talk, let us know. We can do a real deep dive demo for you. Take about 30 minutes, and happy to have that either in a one-to-one or in a team-based fashion. But just keep that in mind. You got a couple of different options for how we can help you. And now let's talk about, I'm gonna skip over some of this because I want to fulfill my promise to keep you guys moving closer to the back of your day. Just know that we think that there's value props across the board for digital and marketing, for your third-party risk management and zero trust. We can talk about all this. We don't need to do it now. And for data privacy, right? I think I've kind of hit on most of those things. But let's talk about the PCI focused dashboard, okay? Meeting and maintaining compliance all in one place. So, I talked about detect, I talked about protect. we put the bubble or the wrapper around it that answers all the questions, that you need to answer to fill out your ROC, to give to your QSAC, or to do your SAC A, whatever route you are based on your level. We put it all in the nice, easy, layman's, understandable kind of dashboard, and we really, simplify the complex. Okay, so the requirements are there. Now, I will say we have this as a freeware solution that you can test, and so feel free if you want. I think my colleague Scott's just put a link there in the chat window. Feel free if you want to, go register for freeware. We'll use our detect based approach, outside looking in. We'll get you at least an understanding, how many scripts are running, what's the inventory look like, who are they, what are they, so you can start the dialogue internal. Okay, but just keep in mind that as freeware, it's limited in some of its functionality and capabilities, but it'll look and feel a lot like this dashboard that I'm showing you right now. And that's a good way to get started. Maybe you want to have a dialogue and you want to get, sort of a level set on how big the project is or how big your risk might be. That freeware piece is there for you to avail yourselves of. But when we come in and we look at the sort of the GUI and the interface, you're going to get all of the answers that you need, in exportable kind of capability, for your QSA or to support your SAC, right? So we'll inventory every script, right? We'll show you, hey, there's 18 scripts on the payment page. We'll give you a last inventory date. We took this inventory, on X date. We saw scripts added on Y date. We'll give you a full view into all of those scripts so you can see everything that's on your site, inclusive of all of the third and fourth parties that are called on by those scripts, right? Because again, it's a supply chain within a supply chain. So you will know Google Analytics calls on XYZ, right? Or you'll know Metapixel is also, calling on or sharing with, Adware or with Instagram or whatever the case may be, right? Just using a couple examples, but we'll expose the shadow scripts as well so that you can get to the root of the issue, how many things are actually running and what that real risk looks like, right? And give you the ability to provide that inventory. We'll give you the ability to justify right here in the platform. So that's a little bit of that manual compliance legwork, right? Howard, from marketing says, on the 17th of January, that this script is required for, these purposes, a sort of like audit chain, right? As you're used to in some of the GRC controls that you guys have in place across the board. And we'll give you, a prompt that, you got to fill out more on the justification side of things. So, in this case, 3 of those 18 are justified. We got some legwork to do on the other 15. We'll scan those web headers, okay, that weekly scan. We're going to give you, a scan there. It requires that you monitor this at least every 7 days, sometimes more if there's potential for breach or if there's been bad activity. We will give you all of that and we'll report on it, in that sort of like easy to use interface. And then, dependent upon which route you go, like, so for freeware, we're only going to alert you on things that we see as events, right? Whether they be, potential indications of compromise, or whether they be, just issues that we flag related to data privacy. We'll alert you in freeware, we'll alert you in detect, but, if you go the full bore, this is where the real beauty, we just block it again outright, right? And we block it without, breaking the functionality of the website or any of that. We just block it from the get-go. And so our approach, we recognize like you've got tons and tons and tons of security concerns, right? And we recognize, this is probably lower on the list of things you would have been thinking about keeping you up at night over the course of the last, 5 years, right? It's not probably on your, number one things that CISO has to address kind of thing. And so what we've tried to do and our approach to market is to really make it super simple, right? Set it and forget it. If there's anybody old enough to remember, like I am, the Ronco commercials in the US, just set it and forget it, right? That's the source defense approach. Super easy, super simplified, dealing with a complex problem, no alerts to manage and respond to on your end of things if you go the protection route. No additional burden. It's not like teams you need to stand up, cross-functional work groups and things of that nature. We're trying to make it super, super easy and give you something that just solves the problem from the get-go. So I kind of talked fast, but I was wanting to make sure that I got you guys, to the end of job and back into your day, because I know your day in a lot of cases is just starting. Love to field any questions you might have. Can go deeper on any of those topics that we discussed, whether it be what we do or the problem as a whole. Feel free to let me know. There is a piece of content that I'm going to have Scott also put in the chat window. Scott, could you drop a link to the essential guide for 6.4.3 and 11.6.1? This is a good piece of content for you folks to take a read on if this issue is kind of new to you. But when we think about timelines, as I mentioned, we can do this fast, rapid, easy. Generally speaking, we can make something happen inside like 4 weeks. Most clients, will spend like no more than a week in POC, POV, and it's super easy to deploy. As I mentioned, we've deployed customers in 24 hours. So it's like, get this off the list and get moving. If you work with a QSA, chances are they know about us. We've been working with the global QSA community for some time now. And we are happy to interface with your QSA, or they probably have experience with us. We've built a QSA dashboard. So I don't know, just engage us and let's get moving. And if we're the right partner for you, great. If we're not, at least we can impart a lot of knowledge that we've gained over the years, both in working with the PCI Council and as a pioneer in this space.